Wanted to take a moment to say, anytime you start working with power tools, remember safety first. Eye protection, ear protection, and breathing protection when necessary are vital to keeping you safe. Join me as I start learning how to work with wood. I'm not an expert, I'm just a guy trying to share what I'm learning as I'm going through this project. I welcome your feedback and comments below of things I've done wrong or things I can do better. I really look forward to getting feedback on this video, and I hope you enjoy the little bit of change of pace. Howdy folks, it's Jeremy KF7IJZ, and today we're going to be doing something just a little bit differently. Normally my channel is about portable solar power for the radio amateur, but recently I've started getting into woodworking. As my daughter's gotten older and it was time to move her into what we call her big girl bed, we discovered IKEA has a line of furniture called the Tarva. The Tarva is solid pine that comes unfinished. I have been painting and staining the furniture as I've assembled it for her room. This piece is a low style 2x3 set of drawers. And as you can see on here, you see the color of the blue and the white. These are the two colors we've been using to finish this. The white has been a Rust-Oleum satin finished paint that I literally just spray on there from the can. And then the blue has been a water-based Minwax stain. So I'm making this video today because not only am I starting to get into woodworking, I want to share the journey that I've been on to learn how to finish wood. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today, is about finishing the pieces. How to take a relatively rough piece of wood, although it does come pre-finished and sanded and planed from IKEA, and turn it into something very beautiful. That includes our sanding, our staining, and then applying our protective coat. The main reason I'm doing this is because as I was getting advice, my dad is a very, very experienced woodworker, and as I'm getting advice from him and other people and other folks on YouTube, I would hear things like, let the tool do the work, or they would talk about sanding between coats of the urethane, and I didn't really understand the why, and so I kind of want to share some of the things I've learned as I've gone through this journey. So we're definitely going to do the top and these two middle drawers, and depending on how it looks, I may even do the bottom drawers, just leaving the nice white stripe here. Of course, the sides and all the bottom pieces will be white, and again, we're just going to focus on finish, staining, and then protecting these pieces. So there are overall 3 steps in the process that we're going to follow. The first of which is sanding our wood and getting as much of the imperfections out of it as possible before applying our stain and our protective coating. And to do that, we're going to be using a Bosch variable speed random orbital sander, about $70. Not too fancy, uses standard 5-inch pads. We're going to use these very handy Rockler bench cookies. And these are a high impact plastic with basically neoprene on both sides. And what I love about them is you put them on the wood and it allows you to create a work surface because this just doesn't move. That'll be helpful to hold our pieces as we're sanding them. As we move into the staining, of course, we need to make sure we remove our dust, so we'll be using a shop vac and then also some tack cloth to make sure that all the dust is removed from the work pieces. Then we will move into applying pre-stain. Now, they say this conditioner opens the wood up, helps prevent blotchiness, and at first, I kind of thought this was a gimmick, but after my experience on the other 2 pieces and seeing how blotchy the stain did come out in the top, because again, this isn't the highest quality wood, it's just pine, I do believe there is going to be some value in using this to prepare to accept our wood stain. This is our blue. The thing I like, and actually the thing I guess that drove us to use the water, is that there are a lot of color options available in the water-based stains that aren't available in the traditional oil-based stains from Minwax. After we've applied a stain coat or 2, depending on what we need, we'll finally move on to doing any sanding or anything else needed to apply the protective coat. And we're going to probably do at least 3 coats of this with sanding in between to make sure we have the best looking smooth finish we can. Along the way, we've got paint sticks because all of these things should be stirred, not shaken, to prevent air bubbles. And then I've got some sandpaper here in case I need to do some hand sanding throughout the process. I will be using these inexpensive foam brushes to apply our stain. And these are wonderful because they wash out quickly and they make very quick work of applying it. But when we go to actually applying the final protective coats, I'm likely going to end up using this brush, which is made for this. I used the foam brushes on the other pieces, and I would say I was 80% happy with the results. In the end, there were still some bubbles and whatnot that showed up in the finish that I could sand out, but then that would probably require doing yet another entire level of the finish. We also have some just lint-free shop cloths here. These are cotton. These are just to help us clean up excess stain or any other messes we make along the way. And this should be about everything we need. Again, this is unfinished pine. They make relatively decent effort to try to keep the knots from facing, because if you look at the back side, you can see we have a lot more. All right, so to start out for the first part, which is sanding with our 120 grit, I've laid down 4 of my bench cookies, which again, these give me a nice stable surface. And we're going to start all of our work on the back sides of these pieces. And the main reason being is this allows us to, especially since this is the first time I'm working this wood with this sander, this will give me an opportunity to judge roughly how much work has to be done to get it right. And if we screw up, the back of the drawer isn't nearly as important as the front of the drawer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just barely, with very little pressure, I'm going to make marks. And I mean very little pressure. It's virtually just the weight of the wood. And the reason I'm doing this is because as we sand, this will help tell me, you know, how much material has gotten off and if we've been over the section. And I find that it was just a helpful way of keeping track of what I've done. So another 2 things is this sander on here. Let me see if you can see this. I have a dust collection hose that I picked up from Rockler. I'll put a link to it, but what's awesome is that it mates perfectly to this, and then the other side is meant to go into a shop vac, so this has been really handy. And as I've used this, I've had 0 dust. This is one of those areas where you'll hear people say, let the tool do the work. And in this particular case, what that actually means is you're gonna basically, your job with your hand is not to push down, it's to keep the tool flat and to keep it moving. It's not quite floating over, because naturally as you're working it, there's a little bit of pressure, but you're not pushing down on this thing. If you push down on this thing, you can cause uneven sanding, you can cause the motor to work harder, you can burn out the motor, you could damage the hook and loop pads. If you start to put pressure on it, you'll hear the motor start bogging down, so it's pretty obvious. So I'm gonna go ahead and start my dust collection by turning on the shop vac. And already, I mean, there's good suction. And now I'm going to turn the sander on. See, if I press, hopefully you can hear it bog down. And you'll notice that the pencil marks start to disappear, and that lets us know we've done that section. Now another important tip is don't let more than the center hang over the side, so you don't run into uneven sanding situations. Once I get all the pencil marks out, I like to go around the edges just one more time. Turn that off. Turn our dust collection off. As you can see, the wood marks are gone. I can certainly tell that it's smoother than it was. You'll see there's some dust that's coming up, and that's the kind of stuff we need to clean up. As I'm feeling this, I'm just looking to see if I can feel any obvious high spots, because that won't impact the stain as much per se, but it will impact when we're putting our final finish on. I'm probably only going to go up to 150 on this. And so right now I'm going to switch out my sanding pad. Changing these things out is a snap. Literally Velcro. I'm going to peel the 120 off, get a 150 out. The folks who are really good at finishing, the folks with a lot of experience will tell you, as you step down through your grains, don't skip anything. You need to make sure you go from 1 to 120 to 150 to 180 and so on. We predominantly have, this is an 8-hole pad. These are made universally for either 8-hole or 5 holes. So what you do to attach it is you line up 2 of the holes. You line up 2 holes that are perpendicular to one another. Nope. Nope. Let me try 2 different holes. That's pretty good. Very light lines on this wood. I don't know if you can see that on camera or not, because they are really light. We're going to start dust collection again. Now this is the 150 grit. I'm noticing that the pencil mark is coming off even easier. This is really all about getting the wood level. There's a notable difference. Now another thing that I learned is when you start the sander, you want to start it above the tool and bring it down to your workpiece. Another important lesson is don't take the sander down at an angle. Always go flat. You know, if you have a spot in the wood you have to work out, don't try to get on it on a corner. Let the sander stay flat and work around it. So one thing we haven't done yet are our edges, and of course they still feel a little bit rough. Probably we'll just do that by hand. All right, now that we've sanded these 2 pieces, next we're going to use the shop vac with a brush attachment. And now we have 2 pieces of wood that are almost ready to be finished. Just got to knock these edges down with some sanding blocks. So now that we've completed sanding on the piece, it's time to prepare the wood for pre-stain. I'm going to be doing both pieces at the same time. So I have out my pre-stain treatment, a stir stick, foam brush. I have my bench cookies down, but this time I'm going to be using these. They are called bench cookie cones, and what they are these little pyramids that sit on top here. They don't really snap, but they give you a very fine point. And what this lets me do is this allows me to still use these to work on the piece, but it allows me to be able to flip it over so I can do both sides. According to the directions, stir, don't shake, allow to penetrate for 1 to 5 minutes, remove excess that is not penetrated with a clean cloth, do not allow product that is not penetrated to dry on the wood surface. Oh, this is interesting. It says after 15 to 30 minutes, lightly sand the surface with fine grade sandpaper. So the first thing we're going to do, like always, is we'll start on the back. I'll say that with the pyramids on, it's not as sturdy of a work surface as what we were dealing with just the neoprene, but that's still plenty good for how little pressure we're going to put on here. We're going to open up our stain, or our pre-treater. Now remember, this is water-based, so we have to work kind of quickly. And also notice that I put on some protective gloves. Kind of a milky color. Have our brushes at the ready. And I'm going to start by just putting the stir stick in and stirring. Now we're going to do a full piece at a time, and I'm just going to dip this in and let it soak some up, and then I'm going to paint it on. In this case I'm going with the grain. It could probably go on thicker, but I'm putting it in kind of thinly, just so that I don't have a ton of excess to clean off when the time is right. But you will notice that does make the wood look a little richer. So that's nice. And like I said, this is the first time I've ever worked with this stuff. So I'm just learning with the rest of you. Spread it out nice and even. Now I'm going to go through, hit all these edges. Try not to get any of this on my shirt. Now we're going to flip it. Again, those pyramids are going to do the bulk of the work holding it. Switch back to our big brush. Trying to keep bubbles from forming. Don't know if you see it on camera, but I'm trying to do so by flipping as I dip, I flip the brush up so that the excess drains into the brush. And I'm working this with the grain. I think at this stage there's not necessarily a reason to not, or sorry, I don't think there's a reason you have to. Again, from a working this perspective, it says we basically have 5 minutes to let it sit, and then we're gonna rub the excess off. And then it wants us to hit it with sandpaper, which I have 220 wheels if we need to do that. But we'll wait and see how it feels when it's done. I'm gonna go ahead and come on over here to number 2. These foam brushes aren't the best in the world, but they sure are easy to work with. Being a little more liberal this time, a little faster. Now we'll hit the edges again. You know, these products are all about 10 bucks a can, which is, you get a lot of material, especially if you've got a lot of pieces you're trying to do like this. It's a pretty decent value. I know it's more expensive per volume, but I really like spending less on, I like buying smaller cans of this stuff, because then, I mean, this pre-treat and the clear finish, yeah, I'll probably use those again, but no way of knowing if I'll ever get around to using our color again. You know, that's, in this case, a little project specific. The little pyramids on the bench cookies are not moving at all, which I'm really digging that. So I'm going to put this on, and as I've been working it and I see how it flows, put it on a little heavier. But yeah, that's doing a good job of bringing that grain out. Definitely making the wood kind of pop. The wood definitely seems to be soaking this up, so I'm going back and adding just a little bit more. Go ahead and move our can back. Put the lid back on. That's nice and sealed. Now we play the waiting game. All right, it's been a couple minutes, so we're gonna use this lint-free cloth just to start hitting this quickly. I can definitely tell some of this is coming off. Still kind of wet, but definitely excess on here. A lot more than I thought, really. But we've had about our 5 minutes. This stuff will dry and harden if it's not removed from the wood. Just to give you an idea, look what that looks like. Here's the side I haven't gone over yet. But truthfully, in looking at this, I don't really see much. This side looks like a lot of it's dried. I'm not really feeling anything new. You have to pay a lot of attention to the edges, because where the brush hangs over, that's where your excess material collects, is on the edges. Also, it won't matter nearly as much now, but later, you really got to pay attention where you're putting your fingers on the work pieces with the gloves, because you get stain and stuff on here, and then there are places on my daughter's nightstand that I've already done this with, but I didn't take this much care, where you can clearly see fingerprints from where there was stain on the glove, and I went to grab. This one has a lot more coming off. This side, much like on the other one, looks pretty dry. There we have it. Remove excess, done. After 15 to 20 minutes, lightly sand the surface with fine grade 220 to smooth any raised grain. Remove all sanding dust. Not going to be a problem for us. We'll let it sit. We're going to come back and then we'll actually feel it to get a sense of, you know, how much the grain has come up after our initial sanding jobs. If we have to, we'll hit it with the orbital sander again with some 220 pads, and then we'll be ready to apply our stain. All right, so we're back, and surprisingly, the instructions said we needed to let this dry for 10 to 15 minutes, but honestly, it's been half an hour and it's just now getting dry. One thing I'm surprised about, again, I've never used this finish before. I'm actually surprised at how much this really did raise the grain. This feels like a completely different piece of wood, and you can really feel grain when you see these imperfections. A lot of it I can feel here, but this definitely has to be sanded again. So the pre-treat, even though that, you know, I wiped it off real well, ends up feeling just slightly tacky. I don't know, there's a friction there. One thing to note is that we are committed to getting stain on these tonight, because general guideline is that this pre-treat is good for somewhere between 1 and 2 hours after application, after it's set up enough to you to work with the wood again. I have no idea what will happen after that period, and really I don't want to find out. It shouldn't take us long to get these sanded down. Back to the random orbital sander. We now have a 220 grit sandpaper on here, and we're just going to hit these real quick. Very quickly. In fact, in the video, that is slick as glass now. That feels really good. These are absolutely slick as glass now. It's, whew, that was well worth the effort. That's quite impressive. This is a 3M fine sanding block. Not worried about getting these nearly as smooth as I did the panels faces. Now to get ready for the staining portion, we are going to hit these with the shop vac real quick, just the shop vac. Nice and smooth. Give it a couple times over. Definitely want to make sure we're getting all this dust off. From here on out, this is completely smooth and ready to take our stain.